Hello, this is Max Stroke. I want to talk about this app. I've done one video already on just the principles and the workflow of doing it. Now I actually just wanted to get into a little bit of nitty-gritty. We have a reservations for, say, a restaurant here, and here's the number of tables. I haven't got the letters on the tables. I've got a date for booking. So if somebody rings up and says, I want a booking on the 8th, on Saturday, tomorrow, I can then click on here and I can actually look and see who's booked already. So I can actually say, oh, well, okay, then at 8 p.m, yes, we can get you. So we can suddenly say, yeah, 8 p.m, we can give them table 10. So we can then switch back into the booking details, and we can go and add a new one, and we can add a new one and say it's on the 8th, and the start time is, what did I say, 8 p.m? And the number of people we find from the people 5, and the name is Trog, whoever he may be, and the phone is 123, and the table we decide to give them table 10. Okay, add. So that gets pushed through, and in our reservations on our export sheet that I've called it here, it's come through. So here's that piece of information that's come through. We can now push it through into our calendar. So that's fine. That is just straight Glide. Glide just comes through and pushes things onto here. I've kept it as a separate sheet where that information comes from. I've got a few array formulas to actually just modify the display, just so that we can do some presentation. I think I did it on here rather than on the other sheet because there was a logic around it. I can't recollect what it was at this point in time. I initially had all of that information coming through at this point here on this sheet, but I was using we had a conversation on a previous app that I'd done, which was display images, and I was using, somebody pointed out to me that instead of using some of the formula, hey, why not use other formula? Also, I was actually using scripts to go and grab the information and put it through, and people said, well, hey, use array formula. And to do that, Jeff Hager then came through with this idea of putting all of your formulas along a second row that Glide wouldn't see, and he used that array formula if length A2 to A is equal to 0. So it just says if this is an empty cell, then nothing. So what it does is it stops the whole thing populating after there's no text. So if there's no text on the next line, it was starting to put extra values in, or just saying no values or something like that. So to stop that from happening, this just is a limiter. Now I was using is blank, and he was using length is equal to 0. What I actually found with this, when I first had that and I had it on this individual sheet through here and I had a second line doing that, is that it suddenly wasn't inputting. I was actually coming into Glide, I was putting data in, I could see the data inside here. So I could see that it was actually inputting the data in, but when I came across to the sheet, it wasn't coming through. And what it was actually doing was it was putting it down after line 1000 for some reason. So it was actually filling it in, but it was putting it in the most obscure place. I suppose, I'm not too sure why it was doing that. So I got really confused by that and very frustrated. So what I decided to do was to differentiate it out. And then when I differentiated it out and actually just had a sheet that brought the information in, then I dragged it across to sheet 4. And in sheet 4, what I'm trying to do is restructure this data so that it comes through into a method that is easily exported into calendars. Now calendars will take an event, it wants a start time, and the start time takes the date and the start time, and it wants it in the 24-hour format, and it wants it in the end time as well. Now the end time is just 50 minutes on. What I've actually got inside the calendars, if you go into calendars, one of the things with the calendar, if you create a new calendar, if we just go into settings and sharings, it's a bit funny. Inside the actual calendar that you have, a new calendar, it doesn't give you that many options to do things, but on the general settings for all of your calendars, it has a few settings that are quite interesting. One of them is the event setting, default duration. Now I'm just going to turn off this speedy minutes and the speedy meetings, and it says 60 minutes. So you can actually have little blocks of time that it allocates for things, 15, 30, 45, 60, 90, and 120. What this speedy meeting does is it has the notion that you're going from one meeting to another. So it's almost like I'm in one class or I'm in one lecture, then I've got to get across campus to another lecture. So between lectures, we'll reduce the time of each lecture down to, instead of an hour, down to 50 minutes to allow somebody 10 minutes to get across campus. So this speedy minutes reduces the time for that. Now it sets it across everything. So all your calendars are set that way. I don't think that's particularly elegant. But that's just how it does it there. So anyway, I decided to make the restaurant blocks for an hour. So that's the method that I've done for that. And I got distracted somewhere there. And so anyway, these are the blocks coming in. So I've got to work out the start time so I can work out the end time. So when I'm actually putting things into my calendar, it's got a start time and it's got an end time coming through. So in both the start time and the end time, it actually needs to have all of this. Now I'm actually got a script coming through there that does that, but one of the things with the scripts, I'm actually just going to, all of this data's in there, so it might double up on things, but just look at this. I'm just going to reformat this. Now this is the same stuff, but if I just format it as a number, this is coming through as a number. I can't remember whether, I think this calculates from the year 2000 or the year 1900 or something, and it calculates the number of hours or something, and then it adds, so it's adding. So if I just go and put the date there, and I just change that format there, that date as a number, didn't do it. Oh, sorry, no, because that, oh no, these are, this is pulling it in, so it's actually pulling the information in from another sheet, so I can't do that while I'm doing that there. Anyway, so actually, sorry, I've got to change the whole array there. So if I change that to just a basic number, no, it's not doing it there. Not too sure what's happening. Anyway, if I do that and I try running the script now, and the script is actually just add the events to the calendar, it goes stroppy because it's trying to get a string, then a number and an object. It's not actually, it's getting confused because it's getting the wrong data coming in. It's actually looking for that data to be in the format of a date time. So when I now run this script again, it'll happily work. But going into what's being pushed into the calendar is it actually has to have an event name. Now again, I've got a unique name on here. I've basically got the start time and the end time. So I've brought the date across. Now there's a reason for that. And then I'm actually putting the table number in there, because if I carried on putting a whole lot of things under there, which was just date and time, and it wasn't specific, it would just overwrite the previous one. So I've got to define it to each table. So therefore, this is table 02, table 03, table 14, or whatever. So I've got a unique identifier in this side, which is basically made up of the date, the start date, and the table. So that's what's actually going into the event time. So that's actually just protecting. I could add the name to that, but I don't want to do it because I'm doing some other fancy things later on. The description again, because I've really only got, it's asking for a location so that it can actually, on your calendar, it can give on a map and it'll find a location for something, and I don't really want to use that. So I've used a description, and basically I've just got a whole lot of concatenation data based on what I've done here. And maybe I should add the name and the number of people onto the end of that so that it comes across. So all of that information gets pushed into the database. At the moment, into the calendar, which I'm using as a database to hold the information. So at the moment, I'm not pushing that data in. So it's quite easy to actually add those other elements on there. So maybe I should do the add that name and the number and also the telephone number as well, and have all of that. So that's held in the display inside the calendar. Now I need that inside the calendar because the next exercise that I do, so the reservation and just looking through that code, is it's got the spreadsheet and it says go and find that sheet name, go and get the data in this range and just iterate through it and put it into the calendar. So that's all it's doing, but it's looking for it in a certain format, and if it's not in that format it gets a bit naffy about it, because those are the things. So now the other thing, I've got a couple of variables. First of all, I want to make sure that it's putting it on the correct sheet name, so I've got the sheet name here as sheet 4, so that's where it's going and grabbing that information. The other one that I'm doing is I want a unique calendar ID. So I've got my calendar ID and I've got it outside my function, and the reason I've got it outside my function is that when I import, or I go into the calendar and pull that information back into Excel, I want to make sure I've got the same calendar ID. So that's why it's outside of that function area, because then it's calling it here. So it's calling the calendar ID when I'm actually pulling the stuff back. So just flicking back into here again, so it just iterates through these first lot of lines A, B, C and D, and just iterates through all of that, because I haven't bothered with location for this. So that's it going and exporting it into the calendar. Then I actually want to import that data back into the calendar. Now, what data do I actually want to import in? Well, basically, I actually want to import in a certain block of time. Like, I don't want stuff from before, I actually want stuff from now onwards. So one of the things with the coding that I've got, and again I just borrowed other people's codes and I just adapted to myself, this particular one that I've got is starting from the 1st of the 6th. Well, since it's the 7th today, we'll start from the 7th for there. It may be better to put some variables in like today, and so the date starts as today, and then it adds another 15 on, or 10 on, or 20 on, or a month on, so that it actually has a new start date and end date. For the time being, I'm just leaving this as to what it is. So we can actually change those variable things through there, and maybe that's a good way of doing that. And then it starts going through and grabbing this information. So if I just run that second item through there, so if and inside the sheets, at the top of the sheets, I'll leave this code there, I've just added a couple of things to the menu. I've got an addEvents and getEvents. So the addEvents adds events to calendars. The getEvents is getEvents from calendars. So this is my import sheet, so I can actually call that script getEvents, and it's going to go through and it's going to start off from, now it's actually getting the earlier stuff, which is quite interesting. Oh, I didn't save it, I don't think. Save. Now let's just blow that away and just see if that happens again. Sorry, I need that one to blow away as well. So if I now run that script getEvents, okay, it's only starting on the 7th and then on the 8th and 9th and all the way through. So that's marvelous. So there we are. So it's gone through and got that. Now the reason what we're doing there is we're using the calendar as the database, and we just pull out the information that we want. I did say on the previous video, I'm not using the Google Sheets to actually hold all these data as a reservation, because it will start bloating quite a lot and start slowing down, and I actually want the sheet to be reasonably lightweight, so I only want to pull in the data that I need to do. Now, two things with these. Again, the only triggers I've actually got these, so you've got to manually come into here and run these scripts to get them in there. I can, for the first one, addEvents, I can do an on change. So I can use a trigger inside reservations here and just use the trigger on that particular one and make it the trigger on, let's just see what it's going to give me. Well, I don't think I have selected a function. So if I do the addEvents, and then I go and look at my triggers, I can then add a trigger. Well, we'll just do that actually. Go away, you. And it's going and thinking about that. And there we go. And oh, sorry, I could have done that from there. What a stupid man. I can choose the function, and then I would just do an on change through there, and it would just fire up and just say, yeah, okay, then every time I actually add another booking in, it sees that booking and pushes it through. Now, at the same point in time, it's actually pushing in all of the data that I've got in there to begin with. And basically, I should be doing something to blow this data away. It's already in the calendar. I don't need it. So maybe I should be deleting this as I go, because I don't want to suddenly end up, if I just go into my calendar, of the same information repeated over and over again. This one's got 2, 3, 4, 3, 4 things. I have actually gone and deleted some other things out of here because it was repeating the stuff coming through. Inside Google Calendar, there is something in here which actually says event setting. I'm not too sure whether it's here or not, but basically I'm not too sure whether it's there or inside here. Except there's something here on one of these things which actually says if it's already in there, don't override it. In other words, don't make a copy of it. So it's there already, so don't do it again. So that's another thing that we can do there. So I've still got to look at cleaning this one up. So, but it's not a major. It's quite easy to do. Is that you can say at the end of that code, once it's actually done, blow it away. And so it actually just deletes the previous line or something. The one issue with that, if you do that, is that I've got a bit of information in here which is basically array formulaing through here. So if I can get the blank second row and put my array formulas into there, maybe it'll work there that I can actually then just blow away from it. Just deletes anything that comes through. So you'll be just doing one thing at a time. So that's a thought going through on that particular one. The next thing that I come through is, again, I import the information back all the way through into here. Again, just to keep it clean, I've got the import onto that table with all of the description, and then in the charts area I come through and start ripping it apart. So I call that information through here, and this is basically an array formula, and it's pulling that data all the way through into here. I don't know what that one there is. I've got a feeling that this is something else, so I don't know if I need that. I think that could be deleted out of it. And again, on this one here, this is where it drove me completely mad trying to do an array. These are some of the calculations that I was trying to do. I was trying to do a VLOOKUP on one part, and then if that's true, do another VLOOKUP on another part, and then I needed to do another VLOOKUP because I wanted to do this date, this time, and this table. So I needed to check all of those three together, and the way that I did that is that I used the concatenation. So that is basically a concatenation of, oh dear, I've gone and erased something. Oopsie daisy. I'll just bring that back in again. So I needed to do a concatenation on the date, on the hour, and on the table, and I join all of those one up there. That's why the events inside the calendar are actually described that way. They've actually got the unique identifier for that particular code, which we are actually doing a lookup on inside this table. So this one here basically does, this looks at table 1. So this is concatenating that piece of information, that piece of information, and that piece of information all together, and it's creating that bit of string that I can now compare to this string here. Now, one of the things which I'd done before was I was actually rounding it because these things have got very long tails through here, and that was getting quite messy. But what I found when I was rounding those down is it gave me a different date and time. So that got all very confused. So I've actually got to do my rounding at the last bit in my lookup as the table here. Oh, sorry, I thought I did. Oh, here I do a left 1, so I trim it all the way down and just put the T down there. I could actually have that. So it takes the data, and if it's true, then it comes through. So let's just look at that data. So what I've done now, before I actually had a fixed date, now I've actually got the formula today. So therefore, all my graphs that I've got, all my charts now start from today. This is today plus 1, and this is today plus 2, and I can iterate down through there and have as many as I want if I want 15 days or 20 days. So that's one day of being able to do the images further on. Now, another little funny thing that I found different from Excel to Google Sheets is to get the actual day. And I was trying to use day function and all kinds of things to get the day of that particular date. And in the end, I found this function online that does it. So it chooses the weekday of that day and then gives me and returns whether it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that's the way that I've got those. Because when you're actually looking up on your calendar, most people will actually just be looking by day. You don't think date, you actually think day. Sunday. That's 2 Sundays hence or 3 Sundays hence. Again, I've only done 3 days of booking. I've got a plan there just so that somebody's got an idea of where things are. So, so I've only really got these 2 activities. Now, this one, pushing things into the calendar, I can do as an on change. Now, pulling things out of the calendar, maybe I do it on every on change. Again, it's one of those things, or maybe I actually make the trigger for that every hour. I've still yet to test it and decide on what to do on that. So in the end, I've modified this one here where this formula is looking at this concatenated piece of information here, and then it then puts into the information and just puts an item in there. Again, I still have conditional formatting on all of these cells. So if I just go on these, you'll see I have conditional formatting and the cell is not empty. If the cell's not empty, put a color in there. So that's the only conditional formatting on that I've got on those ones, and it's come through on the other ones. Again, I think on the previous video I talked about charts, and basically I don't think I have anything more to say. One of the elaborations that I've now done on this one here is, instead of having all of those charts coming through as images on the front page, so that you then on the reservation page, if I come back to there, it's got to generate this image, it's got to generate every single chart that I put through here. I'm suddenly thinking, why bother with that? Why not just put the dates? Because then, again, at this point in time, I'm actually only working on 3. These could just carry on, be repeated all the way down for the whole month, or for 2 months, or for however many times that you want to generate. It generates the charts, and the charts only update on change. So therefore, if there's no change, you've actually just got the same images sitting in there. So it's not updating them. And then all I actually do have is a link to them on a new sheet called dates. So I've got the calculation again to choose this date, and I've started from today onwards. So basically the top chart is based on today. So I'm not linking across here. All I'm saying is the first chart is this chart, which is today. So inside my dates, I start from today and then go 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, etc., all the way down. So I can actually just drag that and go down 50 or whatever. Well, did it wrong. And that's just done that because I haven't done that. And I can actually just drag that formula. So no, it's done something weird again. So we just delete that. I'll worry about that later. So I can do so many days forward. So you do a look forward and then you'll actually just have an image. Now, the way that I'm getting this into there is to use the, I think, references or inline data. So I've got the, that should actually be equal to dates there. And that should be coming through there. Is basically, this is just referencing all, and the all is just got an X. So on my front sheet, I've got the information is equal to date, all multiple, and as long as there's an X on there, on the actual thing, that information will come through. So again, I've just put on that front sheet a plan of any old plan, although you'd most probably put your restaurant layout, because the reason why you'd do that, again, from a restaurant point of view, this is the architect in me coming out, I suppose, or somebody who's worked in restaurants and things, is that you would look at maybe table arrangements. Suddenly there's this is a 2 or 3 table or something like that, and this is a 5 table, and then suddenly you've got a group of I don't know how many, and you can suddenly saying, oh well, we can group this table, this table, this table, because on that particular date those ones are available. So that's when you can look at different table arrangements to actually meet specific people who come through. This is, as I said, it's just a demo plan that I've just grabbed up in here. And again, just as another handy thing, just as a side reference, is that you can actually go to the calendar itself, although again it's not telling you too much, this because again here it's just got 3 4 PMs and then there's a 5. So once you've actually got a few more, it starts not to show up because there's too many. So I've actually got to start cramming in a few more. That's on the month. Maybe on the date you can start seeing that you've got a few onto there, but they're starting not becoming very readable. So the calendar, I'm not too sure whether it's that useful or not, but hey, it's there, so I'm using it as a demo. So I will post the code up there, and I will do links to this app through here, and I will give the sheet links as well. So I hope that's been of interest to you. If you found it useful, can you please give a thumbs up on the video? Thank you very much for watching. Controls.